Welcome to All Things Power, the electrifying podcast by Cummins Arabia, where we explore sustainable power generation technologies, climate change, zero emissions, and more.
So for today, I'm very pleased to be joined by Amit, who is actually the managing director for Cummins Arabia in the region. So throughout the next few minutes, we'll have a discussion about what's happening in the region in terms of the energy transition, what are some of the key challenges facing this region, and what are the opportunities. And we'll take Cummins as one of the leaders in the sector to really provide us with some information about what they are doing, what are the solutions that they are providing to really help this region accelerate the energy transition. So Amit, pleasure to be with you. So would you like please to introduce yourself to the audience?
Good evening, Ahmed. Thank you. Of course. So my name is Amit Deshpande. I'm leading the Cummins joint venture with the Olean Group, which covers a distribution business in 3 countries, in UAE, Saudi, and Kuwait, as the managing director. And I've been with the company for now roughly about 16 years.
Wow.
And in the region for 18 years.
Long journey, yes. So how old is the company if you've been with them 16 years?
So Cummins is over 100 plus years old company. In fact, few years back, we just celebrated the 100 years of the company. So it has been around for a very long time.
So just for the audience, maybe we just give some context. What Cummins as a company does and what Cummins Arabia does, and maybe if there are any differences, and what exactly you focus on in the Middle East in terms of your solutions and the services that you provide as well.
Sure, Ahmed. So I think, Cummins traditionally has been a diesel engine manufacturer, and we proud ourselves to be one of the largest diesel engine manufacturer in the world. And over the years, Cummins has developed a portfolio of different technologies when it comes to diesel engines, gas engines, and so on. So now Cummins is more positioning themselves as an energy provider, and we'll talk about that more as we deep dive into the different aspects of the discussion. And when it comes to Cummins Arabia, we are the Cummins distribution arm for all its products and services in these 3 countries, which is UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait.
Interesting. Yes. So I think it's not just you as Cummins that's being transformed, but I think all the sector of the energy is being transformed as we speak. So I would like to get your insights about how do you see the energy sector in terms of that transition that's happening with the focus on that region and maybe those 3 specific countries, which are 3 of the most oil producing countries, not just in the region, but globally as well. So how do you see this? If you can just do a picture for us, what's happening in that energy transition?
Right. So I think energy transition is a very important topic at this moment. Currently in the region, particularly, we have some of the flagship and major global events happening in the region. We have the COP28 UAE coming in December. We have the FII in Saudi, which is happening in October. So this is definitely a hot topic. And I think, energy transition is very important for this region for multiple reasons. To start with, if you think of the energy, the economic diversification that these countries can achieve. Today, majority of the Middle East countries, particularly UAE, Saudi, Kuwait, are a big part of their economy is depending on oil and fossil fuel exports. So if they transition into, greener energy, renewable energy, there's a lot of, dependency they can reduce on oil exports and also create new jobs and new opportunities in their economies, right? That's one thing. Second thing is, this region is blessed heavily with solar power, and today it is not harnessed to its potential. So there is definitely a lot of opportunities for them to produce renewable energy through solar and use that for their own consumption, whereas they can use the fossil fuels for export to generate additional revenue. That's one thing. And I think with new technologies comes new opportunities, new industries, new jobs. So that's another benefit the region can have from the energy transition. So not only from, I would say from the aspect of carbon reduction or carbon footprint reduction, but there are also other benefits in terms of economic diversification, and it's strategically very important for this region.
Yeah, so I completely agree with you. I think what we have seen, maybe as you said, we are not really fully capitalizing on this opportunity yet. So I think there's so much still to yet to happen across the region, not just the 3 countries you mentioned, but the whole region as well. But just I'm trying to position because for the globe, the region has been known as one of the main exporters for oil and gas.
Right.
And accordingly, it's a very important player politically and economically as well. So how do you see this positioning or the transition playing within that context? Would that actually reduce the power, the economic level or the strength of the region, do you think that that's still an opportunity that would position the region to still be a global player in the energy market as well? Like, do you think that would complement the shortage of the use of fossil fuels, or how do you see that? How do you see that transition happening from that point of view?
I think that's a great question, Ahmed. So, as we see more and more adoption of renewable energies globally, there is a possibility that the fossil fuel consumption may go down, and that can put pressure on the current oil exporting economies, wherein the revenue will be under pressure. So, by producing renewable energy, by exporting some of this, we talk about hydrogen exports, right, as one of the major opportunities for the Middle East. So by doing this, they can not only sustain, but they can also make sure that their leading position as an energy exporter can be maintained by transitioning from the low carbon fuels to from the high carbon fuels to the low carbon fuels, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned, if we dive a little bit deeper into what we mean by energy transition. So a lot of people, you mentioned hydrogen, which is one of the trending topics right now when we speak about energy transition. But is this the only mode of fuel, alternative fuel that we are speaking about, or what exactly is happening in the energy transition? Like you mentioned solar as well.
Right.
What are the areas that we think there should be more investments and there should be more opportunity for, not just for investors from across the globe to come to the region, but also for this region itself to really build on this specific resources that they have?
Sure. So, if we look at a few years back, the current energy or let's say power generation in this countries has traditionally been based on fossil fuels. In Saudi, it's more than 50% oil and remaining on gas. In UAE, it's around 60-70% gas and balance is, oil. But in the last few years, there has been a lot of emphasis on generating through renewable sources. And when we say renewables, primarily, the big part of it has been solar power and wind power, and little bit, other areas like waste to energy and biofuels. Those are the areas where we are seeing production. I think the UAE has done a great job in terms of diversifying into solar power. They have almost reached a capacity of 4 gigawatt, which is roughly about 10% of their capacity. And their goal is by end of 2030 to reach close to 14 gigawatt of energy production through just by solar and renewable energies. And Saudi, for that matter, has a major big target. They have a long way to go. Saudi wants to achieve the goal they have set for themselves is 50% of their renewables, power generation to be by renewables, which means today they are at 5 gigawatt and they have to reach 50 gigawatt in the next 7 to 8 years. So there is massive growth.
But do you think that's feasible to achieve within the time frame that we have? I don't know how much time we have taken to reach to the point we have now, and to get to the point that we reach the target that you mentioned. It needs a lot of investments. It needs a lot of like a strategic will coming from the top down. So do you think we have these in the region that would enable that transition to happen with the pace that you mentioned with these targets?
Absolutely. I think if anybody can do it, it is UAE and Saudi, because these countries, they have the economic power, they have the leadership with the right vision to deliver this type of goals. And there are very, very clear programs that have been launched. For example, we hear about the Saudi natural resources energy program, which is very, very focused. They are promoting investments, they are inviting investors, they are creating the right framework for regulation and platform for investors to come and start producing in the country. So there is a lot of emphasis on public-private partnerships. They are giving incentives for producers to come to the countries. So there's a lot that is happening. And same thing I can see in the UAE as well. The UAE government has set very clear targets, and they have the track record of setting goals and delivering to that. So if anybody, I am very, very confident that UAE and Saudi will be able to hit this goal.
Absolutely, I completely agree. I think, and this has been very clear, not just on the, as you mentioned, some of the areas of the energy sector, but I'm very passionate, for example, about the electric vehicle sector. And if we look at what's happening in Saudi now, with factories being built for producing electric vehicles, and we hear about incentives coming soon also for the end users and for companies to electrify their fleet. So I think if you go 2 or 3 years back, no one would expect a country, an oil-producing economy like Saudi Arabia, will be investing in EVs and energy transition as they are doing right now.
Absolutely.
So I think that shows really the strategic direction that the country is taking. And you mentioned a very important point about the public-private partnerships, and we know that across the region, one of the most heavily regulated sectors is the power sector and the energy sector.
Right.
So, and the involvement of the private sector has been there, but it's really limited if you compare it with other regions. So, how do you see the private sector is playing the private sector's role within that energy transition, especially in these two countries you mentioned, UAE and Saudi? And do you see that role is being activated to the maximum potential that they could have in that transition to happen? And also another question is, you as a private sector player, as one of the leaders in the sector as well, what is the role that you are playing now and what you could provide given your expertise in other countries and supporting other countries in their energy transition, whether supporting with policies, whether your innovation and technology, whether your experience with the transformation as a company that has transformed itself. So like there are two questions here. So
Sure. So I think let me touch upon the public-private partnership question first. And I think it is not an option. It is something that needs to happen in this region. Whether we have reached, are we really harnessing it? I think there is more opportunity to actually open up the private sector, the power sector for the private players in the countries here. The benefits are immense. When you see that private players get involved, the biggest challenge you have in developing all this energy transition is to set up the infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
We need to have the EV charging stations. We need to have a massive investment for hydrogen production, and private players can actually bring in this finance at a international financing cost to this region. That's one of the things. The other piece is, you talked about innovation. I think private sector can contribute in terms of innovation. With all the new technologies that are being developed globally, they can come and bring it to the region, and then it can help the region to move faster in terms of positioning themselves as a leader in the world in terms of adoption of technology. And I think the third piece is about developing the right frameworks and regulation. Right? I think without the right framework and regulation, you cannot have the public-private partnerships to flourish. And I think that is where we see a role for us. For example, as a company, we are heavily engaged with a lot of organizations who are playing a role in let's say regulation influencing or regulation recommendations to the government. We engage a lot with the government agencies, and we share with them what technologies are available for them to decarbonize and what type of roadmap they can put themselves for the government. So there's definitely a role for the private sector, and we are playing our bit in terms of that. Also, what we as Cummins we bring is we have a global presence, and we are present in different geographies with different solutions. So, for example, we have when we look at the emission solutions, you have the Euro norms in Europe, you have the tier levels in US. Recently India launched their CPCB norms. So we have products that can meet the local government requirements in terms of the regulations they are setting. So this is what we actually bring to the table when it comes to offering a wide portfolio. We have starting from diesel engines, which can be at lower emissions. We can offer alternative fuels like biodiesel, hydrogenated vegetable oil. So our gensets, our engines that run in equipment can be run on multiple fuels. Then we have engines that run on natural gas. And then we have a whole set of zero carbon technologies. So we have solutions for every technology, every phase. At whichever phase every country is in, we can offer them the right solution for that particular.
Yeah, and I have just to comment quickly on the point you mentioned. I think it's very important that countries really capitalize on the expertise that private sector has. Like global companies like you have been there with other countries who have started that transition years ago, and they have reached a much more mature position now. So you have gone through that transition with countries, providing technologies, supporting governments with regulations. And I think governments who are just starting their journey, they should really make sure that they engage with these companies like Cummins, who have that expertise to make sure that they are not reinventing the wheel. So they are starting from where others have already ended. So I think that's very important. And sometimes there's a privilege about starting late, which is basically learning from what others have done already. So that's a very important point as well. And I just want to dive deeper as well to really fully understand what Cummins is providing within this energy transition area. and what you have already been working on in the region. So if you can just let us know you mentioned some of the solutions, but I want to dive a little bit deeper into this as well. So what are you doing in the region already? Sure. And what are the solutions that you think you can still bring to the region to support the transition to happen on a faster pace?
Perfect. Sure. So, as I mentioned, we have a portfolio of diesel engines that can be operated on alternative fuels. So today, product that we offer in the region in Saudi and UAE and Kuwait, if the customer has availability of biodiesel, they can straight away start running some of our engine models on biodiesel. So obviously, biodiesel has a lower carbon footprint. Yeah. It is a kind of a renewable fuel, so it reduces the overall carbon impact of the operation for producing power, for example. The other technology that is very widely, and we see a big potential for that, which is widely accepted globally, and it's coming to the region, is the natural gas-based power generation. And you see a lot of emphasis is there on production of natural gas. Saudi is investing close to $100 billion in new gas fields, and we have actually gas power plants running in oil fields where you can straight away take the gas that is being flared into the atmosphere, take it, treat it, bring it to a level where it can be used on our generators, and we can produce power with that. So this is basically, we are using the gas that was just wasted to produce power at very, very low cost. So these are some of the examples that we are doing. Plus, our engines go into multiple equipment. They go into, for example, on-road applications like trucks, buses, and off-road applications like construction machineries, mining equipment. And we also have emissionized engines which can help to operate these fleets of trucks or buses in cities with low emission kind of content. So those are some of the solutions that we provide from engine standpoint. One of the new technologies that we are developing is same engines to operate on hydrogen.
For transportation.
And then eventually it will come into the stationary power generation application as well. But today we see that the application that needs to be decarbonized is transportation, which is trucks and buses, where you use big engines, and today they're running on diesel or natural gas, and there is the infrastructure being developed now in developing countries for hydrogen, and we want to capitalize on that opportunity.
Do we have any projects for hydrogen fuel stations for transportation in the region?
So at the moment, there is no specific hydrogen fuel stations implemented. We are aware that a couple of hydrogen stations are under development. And if you look at NEOM in Saudi Arabia, they have a huge plan to actually roll out hydrogen production. They are looking to adopt hydrogen for power generation, for mobility applications. So there is definitely a lot of potential in NEOM as well on those type of applications. In addition to that, you talked about hydrogen, right? So Cummins has technology for production of green hydrogen. So we have a complete set portfolio of alkaline and PEM electrolyzers, which can be which can take renewable energy either from solar or wind, do the simple process of electrolysis and produce hydrogen from that. And Cummins has actually executed one of the world's largest PEM electrolyzer plant, which is a 20 megawatt. Has been operational for the last 4 years in Canada in Bécancour. And so we have not only technology that we can talk about, but we have actually executed projects which are proven, and the financial feasibility, the economic feasibility has been already proven.
And I think this is a very important point, which is a lot of people think, yes, we need to transition and we need to do it fast, but a lot of people say we don't have the technology to really achieve it yet. Do you think we are not in a stage that the technology that's already available now can help us achieve, I wouldn't say net zero, but to really have fully transition from fossil fuels? And I'll come back to this point about the transition from fossil fuels. But do you think that the technology that we have now is enough to make the transition happen, or what do we need to make it enough?
So I think in terms of the transition, if you see what happened with solar power, right, with the PV cells, because of multiple factors, larger adoption, the PV cell price has drastically come down over the last several years. And similar things need to happen on some of the new technologies which are being talked about. So PV price has fallen, wind price is falling, and now it's the next thing that we are looking at is electrolyzers. So for example, today when you use hydrogen electrolyzers, there is a lot of scope to improve the efficiencies. There is a lot of scope to, as the scale grows, you can have the economies of scale and bring the cost down, which can make the hydrogen life cycle cost, or the levelized cost of hydrogen even much more competitive.
Yeah.
And that can actually give leverage to the Middle East countries, who are blessed with a lot of renewable energy. They can position themselves as a producer of low-cost hydrogen and also an exporter of hydrogen to the rest of the economies in the world.
Which is very interesting because, like, if you look at it, okay, you are transitioning from fossil fuels, but you are not losing the market share because you are still exporting energy, but in another form, which is like for this region, like it's we are still being blessed with all of this. A point you mentioned, which I just want to comment on and let me know what you think about this one as well. So I think what I like about what you said is a lot of people say we need really to stop extracting fossil fuels and really just producing renewable energy to power everything that we use. And people on the other side say we cannot do this overnight. This will take years, decades, if not like maybe hundreds of years. I don't know how long it will take, but it's a very long process to make that transition happen slowly. And at the same time, make sure that we are not disrupting the whole energy system, because a lot of people really still don't have even access to electricity. So and what I like about what you said is you are really still helping those who are heavy emitters, whether it's the oil and gas industry or other heavy emitting industries, to really decarbonize their systems and operations. So yes, you support in producing green hydrogen and other renewable energy sources, but at the same time, you're also supporting those heavy emitting industries to decarbonize. So I think that's what we need. So we need to, build more alternative energy plants, but at the same time, decarbonize what we have now, because this both have
Absolutely.
to go in.
No, I think that's a great point, Ahmed. I agree with yours. The second part of the comment that you mentioned, that oil and gas is here to stay, and the fossil fuel will be used for a long time till we decarbonize the whole world, right? So, but there is a need that the oil barrel that is produced today, how can you reduce the carbon footprint of every barrel that gets produced today? So we have technologies that we are offering to the oil rigs, whether it is pulling out the oil from the wells. We can offer them more let's say less emission or less carbon intensive equipment. We can offer them clean sources of power like natural gas.
Yeah.
So we are doing a lot of bits to support the heavy emitters to actually bring down their carbon footprint, and at the same time help if they want to transition to completely zero carbon, we have the technology to offer to them. And one thing I actually wanted to mention was, I talked about the internal combustion engines, and then I talked about hydrogen side. But interestingly, Cummins is also involved with the battery systems as well. And recently there was announcement that Cummins has done for a huge investment for battery production in the US in partnership with Daimler and Packard, which is going to be a $10 billion investment to produce battery fuel cells in the US.
Not lithium ion, like fuel cells for hydrogen.
It's electric battery cells.
Okay.
So Cummins is getting into batteries now.
Wow. Okay.
And we are going to produce a battery to start with transportation application. And then we are also actually launching in partnership with another technology provider, battery solutions for stationary power application.
Wow, so you're a complete solution provider.
We have a full basket of solutions depending on what customers need and whatever stage they are in their energy transition journey, we have the solution to offer to them.
That's excellent. So I think we touched on a few good points. So we gave some kind of an overview about what's happening in the region and how this energy transition presents an opportunity for the region, as you mentioned, with some of the benefits that you rightly highlighted. We also mentioned about how technology can play a role in this, and you mentioned Cummins as an example, as a leader in this, and what solutions you provide. But at the same time, I think it's not a perfect world. So there are some challenges that are still present. So what do you think are the challenges that are slowing us down from really going faster in that energy transition, especially in that region, maybe globally as well? I don't know if there's a big difference. Maybe if you think there's a big difference between what are the challenges that we see global versus in the region?
Yeah, I think that's an important topic, Ahmed, right? And I think challenges exist, and there are different levels in different geographies, but more or less the fundamental challenges are common, right? So to start with, there has to be a significant investment to build all the infrastructure that is required to decarbonize the economies and to move to clean energy production, right? So we talked about charging stations for electric cars, or electrolyzers to produce green hydrogen, or hydrogen refueling stations. All of this requires significant investment. That is first thing. Second thing is the challenge about innovation. The technologies are still need to evolve. They need to go become more and more, I would say, efficient. They need to become more and more help them to become more competitive, because unless there is economic feasibility and competitiveness, it's very difficult for the private sector to move into mass adoption of those technologies. So that's another thing. And the third, I think, thing is particularly for our region is to develop that capability, those skills locally, and bring that knowledge and skills to our region. So that's another challenge that I see has to be overcome in the next few years.
Yeah. So I fully agree with you, especially on the last point. I think the region has been known as producers of technology consumers of technologies than producers. But I think what this energy transition is presenting is an opportunity, as you mentioned earlier. It's for economic diversification, and I think localization of technology and innovation is really an important tool. And again, I have to mention the example of Saudi with the electric vehicle industry, building a whole industry. So that will mean that you will have to build capacity and really create that talent in the market. Otherwise, you cannot hire thousands of people just from other countries just to come and build cars in your country. So, and we have seen this already, like some initiatives in Saudi to make this happen. So, and innovation as well. So I think this will naturally create a lot of supporting industries around those factories to innovate and build new solutions for problems that weren't existing before. So I think it will naturally be a complete ecosystem that would really, as you mentioned, create jobs, enable innovation, and make all of this happen faster.
I mean, if I can just add to that, right? So, I completely agree with you. And there are very solid examples around us that we can see. So when it comes to now research and development, you have world-class institutes like KAUST or CAPSARC in Saudi Arabia, who are coming up, doing actually
Khalifa here as well, like
Khalifa University here in UAE, Masdar for that matter, right? So there's so much now infrastructure available. There is funds available for people who want to research in that domain and innovate and make this region as the innovator, or bring the technologies from our region. So I think the energy transition has brought now a big opportunity for UAE, countries like UAE and Saudi, to position themselves not only as technology adopters, but also technology exporters in the future.
Yeah, I completely agree. So I think this is great, but let's look 5 or 10 years from now. So I think perhaps we can think of 2 scenarios. There's the business as usual scenario. So if we continue now with the same policies and regulations that we have, which are relatively ambitious, but not as ambitious enough. So how do you see that region, or these 2 countries specifically, in 5 or 10 years from now, if we continue with like the same speed that we're going with now? And maybe if there's another scenario that could be more ambitious, like we have these countries like committing more, like we didn't mention that Saudi and the UAE have already committed to be net zero by 2050 and 2060.
Right.
So that's a big commitment as well to net zero. That means whatever the country is producing of emissions as a country, not just as a company. It's very challenging as a company. Imagine if it's a country. The country would offset, or they wouldn't have any emissions. But if they have extra emissions, they would do something to offset the emissions. So the submission is zero, which is again a very big challenge. And not many countries globally have made that commitment. So if we can imagine another scenario where these countries are a little bit more ambitious, they committed more funding, enabled more institutions to do more research and development. How do you see the picture? Like, do you see 2 different scenarios, or just one scenario that is very positive? Like, what do you see in 5-10 years from now?
Yeah, I think I definitely see a couple of scenarios. If the countries go with the rate that they are today, they will achieve a certain level. But I think there is a lot more potential. There is more potential to actually do more. And if the governments really commit and come up with the right strategies and the right regulations, there is a lot more potential for them to scale up and make a big difference when it comes to decarbonization or the energy transition. Particularly, we know that UAE has now already announced their hydrogen strategy.
Yeah.
We are looking forward that Saudi government will come up with their own hydrogen strategy. Saudi has the Vision 2030 that sets very, very high ambitions when it comes to reducing their carbon footprint. And like you said, they have announced the net zero for 2060. UAE has announced for 2050. And I can see that there are a lot of other technologies and programs that are being adopted. For example, we hear about circular economy, we hear about carbon capture and storage. So there is a lot happening, but I think the government really needs to create that regulatory framework, the incentives for private sector to come and start producing here, create more projects and take that to the next level. So definitely there are a couple of scenarios. With the current scenario, I think they can achieve a certain level, but there is definitely potential to do more.
Absolutely. I think there's definitely more. We're just, as they say, scratching the surface, but definitely there's way more that we can achieve. And I'm sure with I think it's a mindset. So with the mindset of the leadership, I think these countries have, I think that it's coming. So it's not like we are way behind. So that is very positive news. I think another point I would like you to speak about as well, Amit, is so we mentioned your solutions. We mentioned about what's happening in the region. We mentioned about the countries. But it's a very organic process. So countries usually, especially in the region, countries set the target and the vision. Then the private sector has, especially the local industries, they have a very important mission that they need to also set their own targets and act. And we have seen a lot of local companies and also multinational companies in their operations in the region. They have been making different commitments and making some progress and implementation as well. But I think if we look at the contribution of the different industries in terms of the emissions, there are some specific sectors that have the biggest share in terms of their carbon emissions. So which sectors you think they are a little bit lagging behind in terms of their implementation? And what are you offering to those specific sectors to really make that transition and support them in the journey?
Right. So I think, when we look at the different sectors, I think the biggest need is for the industries, the heavy industries which are producing a lot of carbon emissions today, like steel production, basically all type of metal production. And we have, aluminum production is a big thing in these two countries. So those are the countries which are really or sectors that they need to decarbonize. And then, obviously we have the transportation sector that needs to be decarbonized, and then eventually the power sector. So for me, these are the three big carbon emitting sectors that need to be decarbonized. Yeah. And we have solutions for each of these sectors. To start with, when we look at steel or aluminum manufacturing, a lot of their processes, they actually use hydrogen, which is coming from fossil fuels. So we can
the blue or gray
or the gray hydrogen, right? So we can actually help them to put up electrolyzer plants which are producing green hydrogen, and this can help them to produce green steel or green aluminum, which will have a massive export demand as well. So not only they can use it for their own use, but they can produce these green metals and export it to global consumers. So that is one.
Sorry for interrupting, but I have to say this is becoming a trend now, because I think if we look at what's happening globally in terms of the regulations, yes, there's no specific regulation in the UAE and Saudi that forces those companies that they have to have this reduction on the intensity of their products or the carbon intensity. But a lot of these companies, as you mentioned, are actually exporting to the EU and other regions.
Right.
And if we look at what's happening with the EU, with the carbon border adjustment mechanism, like the CPAM, like very soon these companies, if they don't reduce the carbon footprint again, like lower than a specific limit, they will have to pay a carbon tax. And I have personally seen that a lot of those companies are looking at the different solutions that you provide and other companies also provide to really, and they're doing very quickly now, because they don't have time. If they don't do and invest in these technologies now, they will pay the price in the form of a carbon tax very soon. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
No, and I think the other piece is that even though there are no specific regulations on the corporates, you have a huge presence of global multinational companies in the region, and a lot of these companies have set their own let's say net zero targets. So just to give you an example, at Cummins we have our own program which what we call as Destination Zero, yeah. And we have a framework called as Planet 2050, wherein Cummins is producing our products, our facilities, and all our technologies, how can we reduce our carbon footprint? And eventually, our goal is to be net zero by 2050 for all the products and technologies that we provide to our customers. So when we do that, whatever footprint we have in terms of our facilities, we are very cautious about reducing our electricity consumption, reducing our water consumption, recycling the waste. And I can see a lot of other corporates also adopting similar ways of reducing their carbon footprint in all their operations. The other, so coming back to our decarbonization discussion. So we talked about the green metals industry, and when we look at the transportation industry, there are trains today that are running on fuel cells, and Cummins is another a leader in that domain. We have multiple trains today in Europe which are powered by Cummins fuel cells.
Interesting.
And we have discussions.
I didn't know this.
And we have discussions going on, and the Middle East countries.
Since when? Like when?
These have been in operation for the last couple of years now already.
Okay.
And there is also interest for these technologies in Saudi and UAE as well now. So
Makes sense,
for the future investment initiative around that time, we are trying to work with one of our OEM partners to bring actually a train which will run in Saudi, and some of the government officials will be able to witness a train running on fuel cell in this region. So that's another sector, transportation sector. And then we talked about the industries as well. So we have multiple solutions to help them to decarbonize.
Yeah, I think the conclusion from like what I see is everyone there's so much that could be done for every single industry. You just have to start, and you have to start now. Like you have a lot of solutions. There's a lot of solutions out there in the market. So companies just need to start. And I think, as you mentioned, like with Cummins itself, as like decarbonizing your own operations as well, I think the foundation of really making this transition happen is each one has to take responsibility of the full operations.
Absolutely.
So I think if we always talk about scope 1, 2, and 3, and we always say scope 3 is very difficult for companies to achieve and to control. But I think if each company or each individual eventually as well takes full responsibility of their own consumption and behavior, I don't think we'll have a challenge with scope 3. It's problem solved. But
spot on, Ahmed. I think
we keep transmitting the responsibility to someone else. Like, okay, this is his responsibility. I couldn't make it because that. Yeah,
I think everyone needs to, like you said, everyone needs to raise their hand, take the responsibility, and it starts from every individual, from every company. I think everybody has that. They can make a difference in this journey.
Yeah, so absolutely.
Everybody has a role to play.
So I would like to conclude with one question for you, Amit. So what are your recommendations, maybe advice, I don't know, whatever you call it, for maybe let's take every stakeholder group, for governments in the region, for private sector companies, especially the heavy emitters, maybe even for individuals as well, to really accelerate this transition, capitalize on the opportunities that we have, and really like try to solve all of the challenges that we mentioned?
Sure. I think from a government standpoint, I would say that we are really looking to engage with governments. We are open for sharing with them the technologies that are available. We are looking for the governments to bring in the right frameworks for regulation, for incentives to help the private sector to come and set their base here. In terms of the heavy emitters, we would say we have all the solutions. The industry is maturing very fast. There are multiple solutions available. So please feel free to reach out to us. We are happy to partner with them to help them in the decarbonization journey. And for individuals, I think like we just discussed, I think each one of us has a role to play. So let us play, do that our small contribution in this journey to make the world a better place.
Yep, and I don't think there's a better way to conclude this episode than let's just all take responsibility of our actions. And really, we don't have there's no plan B. So I think we have to really take care of this planet and take care of ourselves as well, because we are the ones who are affected, so no one else. So thank you so much, Amit. It was a pleasure. And I really learned a lot from this discussion, and hopefully the audience will do as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And I really like the perspectives you bring into the discussion as well. So look forward to talk to you soon again.
Thank you.